There is a particular kind of loneliness, reserved for those who never ask for help. They are praised for it, called easy, called strong, called no trouble at all. No one sees the quiet arithmetic behind that ease. The needs swallowed, the requests unspoken, the self slowly edited down to something convenient for everyone else. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, they learned that being needed was safer than being loved. This is the story of that learning, and what it costs to unlearn it. The praise that isolates it begins as a compliment. You're so easy to be around. You never make things complicated. Said with warmth, meant as admiration. And for a while, it feels like a kind of belonging, proof that they are doing something right, that they have found a way to be loved without becoming a burden. But compliments, repeated enough times, start to calcify into expectations. What was once noticed as a trait becomes assumed as a role. The friend who never cancels, the partner who never complains, the employee who absorbs extra work without asking for more. Somewhere along the way, ease stopped being something they chose and became something they owed. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being reliable in a way no one questions. It is invisible exhaustion, the kind that leaves no mark, because nothing appears to be wrong. They show up, they function, they smile in the right places. And because nothing looks broken, no one thinks to ask if anything is. This is the quiet isolation of low-maintenance identity. To be so competent at managing your own needs that others forget you have any. Not out of cruelty, simply out of trust. They trust that you are fine because you have shown them, again and again, that you are. And so a strange loop forms. The better they are at not needing anything, the less anyone offers. The less anyone offers, the more they confirm, to themselves, quietly, that needing is something to be handled alone. It becomes a closed system, self-sufficient, self-sealing, lonely in a way that resists language, because there is no obvious wound to point to. What makes this ache so hard to name is that it does not look like suffering from the outside. It looks like maturity. It looks like having it together. Friends might even envy it. The calm, the unbothered air, the sense that nothing ever seems to shake them. They do not see that the calm is not peace. It is practice. A performance so well rehearsed it has started to feel like truth. Underneath it, though, something quieter persists. A wish, rarely spoken even to themselves, to be asked, "How are you?" really, and to be allowed an answer that isn't good. A wish to be someone's responsibility for once, instead of always being the one responsible. Not because they are incapable of independence, but because independence, when it is the only mode available, stops being a strength and becomes a kind of exile. A life spent standing just outside the circle of care, holding the door open for everyone else. Where the silence was learned, no one arrives at adulthood already fluent in self-erasure. It is taught, gently, unintentionally, sometimes even lovingly, long before there are words for what is happening. Picture a child in a home where attention is a limited resource. Perhaps a parent is overwhelmed, distracted by survival, illness, or their own unresolved pain. Perhaps there is another sibling whose needs are louder, more visible, more urgent. The child learns, without being told directly, that there is only so much room for need in this house, and that the safest way to keep love available is to require less of it. This is not a dramatic realization. It rarely announces itself. It happens in small, cumulative moments. A hesitation before asking for something, met with a sigh. A request quietly denied, not out of malice, but exhaustion. A moment of distress that goes unnoticed because someone else's distress arrived first. The child adjusts. Children are remarkably good at adjusting. They read the emotional weather of a household the way sailors read the sky, and they recalibrate accordingly. So they become easy. Not because ease is who they are, but because ease is what keeps the peace. They stop crying as loudly. They stop asking twice. They learn to soothe themselves before anyone notices there was something to soothe. And crucially, they learn that this self-sufficiency earns something valuable, approval. Such a good kid, so independent, never any trouble. This is where the wound and the reward fuse together. The very thing that caused the ache, the withdrawal of need, becomes the thing that is praised. And so the child does not experience this adaptation as loss. They experience it as success, a skill mastered, a way of being loved that, unlike vulnerability, feels reliable and controllable. It is worth pausing here because this is not a story about bad parents or broken homes. Often, it is simply the story of ordinary limitation, parents doing their best inside their own exhaustion, their own inherited silences. Love was present. It simply could not always stretch to meet every need in the room, and children sensing this quietly decide to need less, so that the love available might feel like enough. Years later, that child becomes the adult who apologizes before asking for anything, who feels a flush of guilt when someone has to accommodate them. Who would rather struggle silently than risk being perceived as difficult? The origin is rarely remembered clearly. It does not live in memory as an event, but as a posture, a bracing, a reflex that activates long before conscious thought has a chance to intervene. The psychology of self-erasure. What looks like personality is often, underneath, a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Psychologists who study attachment describe this pattern as a response to inconsistent or conditional caregiving, a strategy children develop when connection feels safer to earn than to simply receive. When love appears contingent on behavior, a child's mind does not conclude love is unreliable. It concludes, more painfully, I must be manageable enough to deserve it. This gives rise to what trauma researchers sometimes call the fawn response, a lesser-known cousin to fight, flight, and freeze. Where fight resists and flight escapes, fawning appeases. It is the nervous system's attempt to secure safety not through confrontation or withdrawal, but through accommodation, becoming so agreeable, so undemanding, so easy to love, that conflict never has the chance to arise. Fawning is not weakness. It is a highly sophisticated survival strategy, honed in environments where visibility once felt dangerous. The trouble is that survival strategies do not know when the danger has passed. A nervous system shaped in a home where need went unmet does not simply relax once that home is left behind. It carries its old logic into new relationships, friendships, partnerships, workplaces, applying a rule written for one set of circumstances to entirely different ones. The body remembers the lesson even after the mind has, in theory, moved on. This is why so many low-maintenance adults describe a strange numbness around their own needs. Not repression exactly, but a genuine difficulty locating what they want. Years of prioritizing others' comfort can dull the internal signal that once said, I need something here. Some psychologists refer to this as a kind of self-alienation, competence in reading everyone else's emotional state, paired with an almost foreign relationship to one's own. There is also a quieter mechanism at work, the way self-sufficiency becomes identity protective. If needing others once led to disappointment, then not needing them becomes a kind of armor. To stay unbothered is to stay untouchable. Vulnerability, in this framework, is not simply uncomfortable, it is unconsciously coded as unsafe, even in relationships where it would in fact be welcomed. Understanding this does not undo it instantly, but there is relief in the explanation itself, in recognizing that this pattern is not a flaw of character, but a coherent, intelligent adaptation to a younger version of life. The body was not being irrational, it was being loyal to a lesson that once kept it safe. The weight of being fine. Every unspoken need accumulates somewhere. And for the low-maintenance adult, the reckoning rarely arrives as a single dramatic collapse. More often, it arrives quietly, an ordinary evening that suddenly feels unbearable, a small request from someone else that triggers an outsized wave of resentment, an unexplained exhaustion that no amount of rest seems to touch. This is the turning point, not a crisis exactly, but a rupture in the performance. A moment where I'm fine no longer holds its shape. Perhaps it is a friend who, without being told anything was wrong, gently says, you don't have to be okay all the time, you know. Perhaps it is simply the accumulated weight of years spent giving more than was ever asked for, met by the slow realization that no one can reciprocate care they were never shown was needed. What makes this moment so disorienting is that it often feels like failure rather than awakening. To finally need something, to cry in front of someone, to say I can't do this alone right now, can feel like breaking a promise made long ago, a promise to never be too much. The old fear resurfaces instantly. If I stop being easy, will I still be loved? And yet, something different tends to happen than what was once feared. The friend does not leave. The partner leans in rather than away. The need, once spoken, is met. Not perfectly, but genuinely. This is often the first real evidence, gathered not in theory, but in lived experience, that the old rule no longer applies. That the world they are living in now is not the world that first taught them silence. Healing here does not look like a sudden transformation into someone who asks for help freely and without discomfort. It looks smaller than that, and slower. It looks like pausing before saying, I'm fine, and just once, saying something closer to the truth. It looks like letting a friend see the tired version, not just the composed one. It looks like tolerating the discomfort of being witnessed, the flush of vulnerability, the fear of being a burden, long enough to discover that the connection survives it. Each small act of honest need becomes evidence against the old belief. Slowly, the nervous system updates its understanding, not through insight alone, but through repetition, through proof, through relationships that hold steady even when the performance of ease finally, quietly, drops. What was there all along? Perhaps low maintenance was never a personality. Perhaps it was only ever a costume, well-made, convincing, worn for so long that it began to feel like skin. It served its purpose. It kept a child safe in a home where need felt costly. It earned an adult approval in worlds that rewarded self-sufficiency over softness. It was not wrong to wear it. It was simply never meant to be worn forever. Beneath it is someone quieter, someone who has needs like anyone else, ordinary ones, human ones, someone who gets tired, who sometimes wants to be taken care of, not because they are incapable, but because being cared for is one of the plainest forms love takes. Someone who has spent so long being the steady one that they forgot steadiness was never supposed to mean invisible. To lay the costume down, even briefly, is not a loss of strength. It is perhaps the truest strength, the willingness to be seen without the armor of usefulness. To trust that connection does not require constant proof of ease. There is nothing to fix here, nothing broken to repair, only a pattern, understood, and a door, quietly opening. Somewhere, still, is the version of them that existed before the world taught them to disappear politely. Not gone, only waiting, patient, the way anything real tends to be, for permission to need, and to be met, and to stay.